Hey there, welcome to another training sessions on Decisions version 8. In this session, we will learn about reports in decisions. And we'll be covering some bit of topics about reports in order to understand how we can use reports, what they do, and what we can build using reports in decisions. So we will start by looking at creating a report, then we will have an overview of report designer. We'll add the data in the reports, we'll add some fields, and we will manipulate the report in order to show what we would want to show on the report. So I'll quickly talk about what reports are in decisions and how powerful they are in terms of implementing a use case that involves the UI component and also involves consuming the information in the visual manner. So the reports and decisions are part of the visual designer that we have, where we can add the data, we can add rules to kind of show some values as highlighted. And we can also interact with the data which we have in the report. We can add filters, we can sort the information, we can also organize that. And the reports in decisions are integrable in the sense that they can be integrated to other systems and we can call them via APIs. And the reports in decisions can also be actionable, meaning that when I click on a row in the report, it'll allow the user to perform some actions. And we can also add permissioning to the reports in order to make sure that a certain group of individuals see the report and the others do not. And there are different ways to use reports in decisions. The first one is to embed that report on the dashboard. The second way to use is in a workflow. I can call the report, use the information or the records in the report, and then use that in the flow. And I also run reports as scheduled jobs. I can designate a particular date and time when I would want to run that report. And fourth, we can call a report via API. This is kind of a representation of what you will see when we start creating our report. This is a quick snapshot of how the report designer looks like. And as you can see that it has four main components. In one, we add the data source, the source from where we would be getting the information which we would want to showcase on our report. The second point here says about the filters, how we can kind of filter our report depending on what we would want to show, what we don't want to show. And in the data fields section, we add all the columns that we would want to be displayed on the report. And the views, the fourth point here, allows us to showcase data in other formats in terms of I can create a pie chart or I can create a bar chart instead of regular record level representation of a report. And for each column that we would add in our report, we would be getting this property panel in decisions. And this allows us to configure that particular column in terms of if we want to show that or hide it, we can also sort it, we can group that, we can also change names of the columns and other things. What we would do today is we would take you through an example and build the report together. And this is the sequence we would follow. We would start creating a report. We will add the data source. So we have some data to populate our report. And then we would sort of format the information which we have. And finally, we would do some data manipulations. So with that, what I'll do now is I'll switch to my decisions portal, where we would start building our report and understand how we can create reports. So this is version 7 Decision Studio. That's how it looks like. We have these design buttons on the top. We would be interested in creating a report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into the folder which I have created for this session. And inside the reports designer folder, I'm going to start creating our report. To do that, I click on this button called Create Report. And I click on that. and it allows me to provide a name for the report. So I'm going to call it applicant loan request report. Now, what this report will have is it'll showcase the information about the loan requests that we have received in our process. So when I click create, it takes us into the report designer that we have in version 8 of Decisions. Now, there are a couple of sections here that I would want to point out before I start building this report. On top, you would see these quick buttons where I can save my work. I can create checkpoints if I want to go back into previous versions of report. So I can create checkpoint for that. I can also look at the history, the dependencies, and I can also run the report to kind of see how my report would look like for the end user. And here, as we saw in the presentation just a bit ago, we had these 4 major sections where we add the source, we can add the filters, the data fields, and also the views. And this is the area of the report that will actually show the data when we have kind of fetched that into this report. And on the right-hand side, we get this properties panel that you can use to kind of configure your report or customize it as per your needs and requirements. So I'm going to start by building our report. And to do that, the first thing that I would do is add the data source. So I click on this, and you can see that we have different type of data sources available in this instance. But the one that we would be using today is applicant loan request. So I'm going to call that by searching here. And when I do that, I see that I have something called applicant loan request. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So with that, this report knows this is the data source that it has to bring the data from. And now I can click on add fields, and it will show me all the fields or all the columns that there are in that table, in that data source, which I want to use to create this report. So I want to populate them one by one. So I'll start by displaying the user ID, and then maybe I'll have employment status, then I'll add salary, then we'll have other income, then we have requested loan amount, the loan rank, the date of birth of the applicant, and finally the credit score. So as you see, when I add the fields on top, it displays them here as part of this column and the rows. And you notice that I have all the columns that I've added right here. So I can actually see what was the data that they were holding. And in the future, as and when this data source gets more information or more data stored in this, it'll all get populated in this report runtime. Now, there are a couple of things to note here. As you can see that in some of the columns, for example, the salary, the other income, and the requested loan amount, the information is not in the right format. So in the reports, we can kind of control the format in which we would want to display the data. To make that change, what I'll do is I'll select the field in which I want to change the data format. When I do that, I come to the properties panel where I can see that I can change the name of the column, I can adjust the width, and I can sort it, and I can group it and some other things. And this part here, the format, this is where I can actually change that to currency. And when I do that, it respects this formatting, and it would show me the salary in a nice and neat manner. So I can do the same thing for the other fields like other income. And I would do it for one more here, which is requested loan amount. Now with that, our report looks neat in the terms of the information about the currency that we wanted to show. And you can also notice that for the date of birth, along with the date, we are also seeing the time. So let's say we are not interested in looking at the time. We just need to know what is the date of birth of the applicant. So we can click on that field. Again, scroll down to the formatting section. And then on the format, through this drop down, I can pick the format that I want this report to have for this particular field here. So I'm going to keep it short date. And when I do that, you will notice that the time disappears. I just have the date, the month, and the year as the date of birth. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to save this report. Now, when I make a save, all the changes, all the data addition, all those data fields that I've added will be saved. And next time when I come into this report, I would be able to see this data and continue from here. Now you would notice that we have this button called Run Report. When I click on that, decisions actually show us that how this report would be shown to the end customer so that we can take right actions at this point if we want to change something. So I'm going to close that and talk about some more things in this report that we can do. And one of the things that we would start would be adding filter. So filter, as the name suggests, it kind of helps us to limit certain information to be displayed on our report. For example, in the employment status, we see that there are two types, basically, the employed and the unemployed. But if you scroll down, we would see that we also have a type which says student. So maybe the end users would not be interested in looking at the data for these students. So what we can do is we can add a filter that kind of removes this row or any number of rows that have employment type as student. So to do that, we click on Add Filter. And you can notice that when I click on this plus, it shows me all the fields that I have on which I can perform this filter. So I'm going to click on something called employment status that we have here. And when I expand that, it shows me all the filters that I can add to this particular data field. Now, these filters are data aware because it's a string. So it shows me options like ends with, starts with. But had it been an integer, it would show me things like greater than, less than, equal to. So we'll start by using something called employment status not equal to, which is our first one. And as I added that, you will notice that all the data disappeared. This is because if I'm not providing a value for the filter, which it equates to, the report is not going to show any data. So I'm going to come on the properties section on the right. And here, I'm going to mention the value as student. And what I'm telling to this report is, from all the records that we have, please filter out the records where the employment status is student. And as I scroll down, you will notice that that row has disappeared from this report. And when I click on Save and Run Report, you will notice that we do not have that student here anymore. So that's how filtering works in decisions reports. And it's a very useful and a very dynamic feature which helps us to kind of limit some information which we do not want to show in our report. Now I'll move on to show some of the other things that we can do to kind of manipulate the data that we have here. And one of the things that I want to talk about is what I call as grouping in reports. So you can see that right now, there's no grouping on the data that I have here, and everything is kind of mingled with each other. But if I want to tidy things up in this report so it becomes easy for the eyes to look and take quick decisions, we can add groups on this data. To do that, I click on this icon here, and it shows me what are the columns that I have. I can also sort using the columns, and I can also group as per the columns. So in this case, we will be interested in grouping this data as per the employment status, so that the applicants which are employed would be put in one bucket, and the applicants with the employment status as unemployed would be put in a different bucket. So let me actually click on that and hit apply. Now, as I did that, you would see that we have two segregations here. We have the data for the unemployed in one group, and we have the data for the unemployed applicants in another group. So with that, it becomes very easy for the end user to have a quick look and decide what do they want to do with the data. And not just grouping, we can also sort this information. To sort this information, all the data that we have, what I do is I click on the field which I want to sort this data around. So let's say we are interested in kind of sorting the data on the basis of requested loan amount. So I select that data field, and in the properties, I scroll down to this option called sorting. Right now, there's no sorting on this column. So I can pick either descending or ascending. So I'm going to pick the descending one here so that I can see. Let me quickly refresh and click ascending. As you can see that right now I just clicked on ascending, and it kind of organized that data in a nice way where I can see it's increasing. And I can also pick descending, where I can see the data is going from top to bottom. And this would be applied to both the groups or any number of groups which we have. So the reports in decisions respect all the filters, all the grouping, and all the sorting of the data that we have done all together. So in this way, we can make our reports look the way we want for the end users to consume it in the best possible manner. So when I click on Run Report again, it's going to show me with the changes that I have kind of applied to my report. As you can see, we can see two groups, and inside each group, we can see the requested loan amount in the descending order of sorting. Now coming back to our report and looking at these data fields. So these are data fields that we got from the data source or the table that's storing all this information. But let's say we also want to add field that is some sort of a calculation on the data which we already have. For example, we have salary and also the other income for an applicant. What if we want to calculate the total income and display that on this report? So to do that, we click on Add, and we would use something called calculated columns. When I expand this, you can see all the different type of columns that I can add that would actually be dependent on the existing data that I have in this report. So in this case, I would be interested in adding two columns. So we get the total income of that applicant. So I click on that and I get this form popped up where I can pick the value which I want to add. So I'm going to add salary with other income. Now, as I do that, decisions, as you can see in the background, has kind of summed up those two columns and given me the total income. I can give the title. I would want to call it total income. I can use sorting. I can make it visible or hide it. And I can also add format. So I'm going to pick currency because we are talking about money here. And I click OK. So with that, you would notice that we have one more column added, and this time it's total income, which is sum of the existing columns which we had in the report by default. Similarly, we can click on Add again and look at something that we would want to do for some other column that we have in our report. For example, in this report, we are getting the date of birth of an applicant. But from the date of birth, we are interested in calculating the age. So in the calculated columns, we can use this option called Get Date Age. Click on that. And then decisions will actually ask me, which field do you want to calculate? And I'm going to pick date of birth. And I'm going to give this title as age. And I'm going to click OK. As you can see that now we have one more column, which is called age. And this is driven from the date of birth. And the calculated columns feature is what helped us to calculate the age. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the report once again and look at all the changes we did to this report. Starting from creating the report, adding the data fields, adding the group, then we added a filter to remove the records which were submitted by a student. Then we sorted things on the basis of requested loan amount. And then we did some calculations on the columns to get customized new columns. In this case, it was total income that was driven by the summation of the salary and the other income. And then we got age, which was driven by the date of birth. So decisions reports are highly customizable and very powerful in the terms of manipulating data, exposing data, and showing that to the end user so that they can take quick decisions in the most organized manner. So I close out of this and come back to our report. Now, depending on what other filters, what other grouping we are looking to add to our report, we can click on the different sections and the different features that we discussed in this session. So with that, I'll close out on this session because this kind of covers everything that we do on a basic report. We'll meet again in the next video. Thank you.